Hey Scotty, this is Miss Tracy. So I wanted to go over lesson 91 and some of the problems that you're having. So the thing that you've got to remember is the order of operations. The order of operations is everything, and that order of operations is PEMDAS. That means parenthesis. Parenthesis also means any symbol of inclusion. Any one of them. And that should be an S, not a T. So any symbol of inclusion is included in this P for parenthesis. That means brackets. That means absolute brackets. That means curly brackets. That means other parentheses. We always look inside of those first in order to see what has to happen before we can do the rest of the problem. There's a purpose in that, and that purpose is so that everybody can come up with the same calculation. When there are agreed upon rules, and these are the rules. So the symbols of inclusion are always first. And so I'm looking inside of my symbols of inclusion for this problem. This is one of the ones you had on 91 that you struggled with. And inside of here, I'm going to look to see if I have the rest of this. Exponents, multiplication and division, or addition and subtraction. And multiplication or division always happens before addition and subtraction. It is not the order from left to right. It is the order from left to right that is in this order that occurs here. So within my symbols of inclusion, the first thing I look for is there any exponent? Is there any multiplication or division? First, no exponents, but we do have multiplication right here. So this would have to happen first. Now, it doesn't matter if you say, with this setup, it doesn't matter if you say 6 times 2 is 12 and come up with -3 minus 2 minus 12, or if you say -3 minus 2 plus -6 times 2. Because it's the same thing. You're still going to get -3 minus 2 plus minus 12, or -12, which then turns into this. Because the positive times the negative, whenever you have any value on the outside of a parenthesis, any operation here, there's an invisible 1 that's on the outside that is being multiplied times what's in here. Positive 1 times a -12 becomes a -12. So then that operation changes to subtraction because there's always that multiplication going on that adjusts. It always adjusts. So when we say simplify this, you're going to end up with this. All right, so either way you look at it, if you look at it with PEMDAS, you should have -3 times -2 minus 12, which when we have the same sign, we add and keep the sign, right? So that would be -3 times -14 every single time. Now, we're going to keep this operation here. We know when we have an operation outside of a parenthesis or a bracket, it's actually a -1 times everything in here. But we can't deal with that yet because we've got a bracket that we have to look at, and then we have a parenthesis inside of the bracket. So we've got to deal with that first. So minus bracket 4, 2 minus 4, that's a positive 2 and a -4. When the signs are different, we subtract and keep the sign of the bigger number. So 4 is the bigger number, and it's negative. 4 minus 2 leaves 2, and it's going to be a -2 because that 4 is a negative. All right, now we still have more stuff to do on the inside. We can't eliminate this bracket here, or this parenthesis here, because you've got a 4 and no operation here. So this is multiplication. Multiplication has to happen before addition and subtraction. That's why it's listed first. Okay? Minus, here's our bracket, 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. Now we put in our minus 2. Now that we've eliminated this parenthesis, now we have clean instruction on what to do inside of this larger bracket. Every time you do that operation, you are trying to eliminate your symbol of inclusion. That's what you're seeking to do, is to simplify. So in performing this calculation, so now we only have one number in here, we simplified it. In doing the multiplication here, we were able to eliminate it because there was only one number in here. So we were able to just go ahead and multiply. So 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. All right, now we have parenthesis and a bracket, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. We still have an operation in here to do. We have a negative 8 to combine with a negative 2. So negative 3 times negative 14 minus negative 8 combined with a negative 2 is going to give us a negative 10. Now whenever you eliminate additional symbols of inclusion and you've got it simplified, you can choose whether to keep the square bracket or go to a parenthesis. It's whichever one you want to use because they're both symbols of inclusion. Keep the bracket if you want. It doesn't change the value of the problem. Like I could have made this a square bracket. It would still be this minus sign. Minus would be a positive, right? It's literally negative 1 times negative 10, which would make this a positive 10. And that would eliminate the bracket. So it doesn't matter which bracket you use, you're going to eliminate it anyway, right? You could use whatever symbol you wanted, except for absolute value, which has its own meaning. So we have negative 3 times negative 14. Negative times negative makes a positive. 3 times 4 is 12, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3. We carried that 1, that makes it a positive 42. Negative 1 times a negative 10, or you could just say negative makes a positive. That'd be plus 10. That would equal a positive 52. Right? The whole point of eliminating the symbol of inclusion, I mean, we're simplifying as we go. The point of PEMDAS is to simplify. It's so everybody gets the same answer. And it's a methodology of eliminate the symbol of inclusion. That's the first step. All right, this was the first step. We brought it to here. Multiplication comes next. That's our order. Multiplication and division from left to right as we see it occur. Right? We didn't have any exponents, so we skipped that step. Then, once we get rid of all the multiplication and division, right? This was the parenthesis step. It came in front of the multiplication and division. So we do what's in the parenthesis first. Now there's nothing to do. So then we do the multiplication implied by the parenthesis. We know whenever there's a whole number outside of parenthesis, it's multiplication. So we do what's implied by that operation. So we multiplied. Now that in doing that, we got rid of that parenthesis, which is the whole point. We want to get rid of the parenthesis, but we have to do the order that's inside of them first. And we have to follow the same order here for what's inside of them until we can eliminate them entirely, and then we can do the problem straight away. Okay? All right, so let's look at this one, and let's see if we can work our way through it. All right, so we have a negative 2 on the outside of parentheses, so we know that's going to be multiplication right here, right? That's being multiplied. Same thing here. Positive 2 is going to be multiplied times whatever we resolve in here. So we got to resolve the parenthesis first. So negative 2 is being times this. Negative 6 minus 2 times 5. This has to happen first because it's multiplication. So negative 6, negative 2 times 5, that's going to be a negative 10. Plus 2 times, because it's the parenthesis right there, negative 2 combined with a -1 is a -3. Right? Now, this addition comes after the multiplication, and the multiplication here is implied by the presence there. We just wrote it out to remind ourselves. 2 times this. We still have an operation in here that hasn't been done yet, so we can't multiply yet until we finish the operation. So -2 times -6 combined with a -10, it's going to be a -16. Plus, we have 2 times a -3. Well, 2 times -3 is -6, right? So there's our -6. 2 times -16, or -2 times -16, is going to be a +32 because we have a negative times a negative. And then we have plus a -6. Well, we know that's a positive times a negative, so that's going to be -6. Now we can do the math, just like we used to in elementary, right? We've simplified it. 32 minus 6 is going to be 26. And that's your answer. So you have to take it a step at a time. You can't just go straight across and solve it. You have to break it down and do this order first. And it means there's going to be multiple lines of work that you've got to write it out. You can't just do it all in your head. You can't hold on to it. You can't do it from left to right just in the order that it occurs. You have to do it from left to right for each step in the order that it occurs. So parenthesis steps first. Then once you get them down to where there's only one value in the parenthesis, then you've got that multiplication going on. Okay? Let's look at the other two that you had struggles with, and let's walk through them. So -4 is on the outside of the bracket. That's multiplication, but it's a bracket. We've got to deal with all of this stuff in here first. Okay, so -4. And a negative on the outside of parenthesis, that implies -1 times -3, which would be a +3. In doing that multiplication, we got rid of that parentheses. Now we have a -1 times a -4. That implies multiplication. That's going to give us a +4. So we write +4 plus 4. The operation plus or minus is the sign of the number. So if the sign of the number becomes a +4 and there's not another negative sign floating around in there, it's a plus sign. That's the operation. We are just combining positive and negative numbers. So that's how that works. It's always plus unless there's a minus sign that cancels it. And in this case, we know 2 minus signs cancel each other and make a plus. So there's that. All right, so we can't do anything else in this pass, right? We've already done the calculations once. We've gotten rid of the multiplication inside of our square bracket. So let's look at what's going on next. +6. +6. That's just +6. Minus, in parentheses, -5. So that is a negative and a negative. That would make that a positive because it's a -1 times a -5. So negative times negative is a positive. So that's going to become a +5. And that eliminates the parenthesis, right? So now on our next pass, we're going to combine what's inside of this bracket and combine these numbers. -4, and I'm going to just go ahead and change that to a parenthesis to make it look easier. 3 plus 4 is 7. And +6 plus 5, because they're not in a bracket, they're just numbers out here by themselves, we can add them together. They're not affecting anything else if we put them together now. So that's +11. We still have this multiplication to do though. So let's do the multiplication. -4 times 7 is -28 plus 11. Now we have the combination of a positive and a negative number. So we subtract. The signs are different, so we subtract and keep the sign of the bigger number. So 28 minus 11 is going to be 17, and the 28 is bigger, so it's a negative. then that would be that answer. Okay, this last problem, let's walk through it. We've got -2 times whatever is in the parenthesis. So we look inside the parenthesis and see what we can do. So in here, we have a -3 times a +5. So that's going to be a -15. -2 times -2. -3 times 5, -15. All right, you see how that works? Minus, we can't do anything with that yet. We have 2 times what's in this parenthesis, 3 minus 5, that's going to be a -2. And this +2 doesn't affect anything yet. Now we go and make another pass. We're looking to see if we can eliminate something else or do some other type of operation to get rid of these parentheses. -2, we still have something to do inside the parentheses, so let's do that. -2 minus 15, like sign, so we add them together, keep the sign, minus 17. Okay. Now, we still have stuff to do in here. 2 times -2 is a -4. +2 doesn't hurt anybody. It just is along for the ride until the next step. The next step, we have multiplication here, and then we can get rid of this parenthesis altogether. So -2 times -17 is a +34. We can't do this calculation of multiplication until we get everything out of the parenthesis, right? To the last step. We still have an operation in here, so we still have to deal with it. Minus -4 plus 2, that's going to be a -2. Now we're down to one single value inside of this, so we can get rid of it. On our next step, we're going to do this multiplication. So 34 and a negative times a negative, that's a -1 times a -2. This could be a +2. Now we have no more parentheses. We can perform the operation the way that we know we can with addition and subtraction, and that'll be 36. Okay? You've got to walk through the steps of the problem more than one pass. You've got to do the order PEMDAS. Now, none of these had exponents, so we don't have to deal with that. But it's multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction, right? People get this messed up. It's not multiplication first and then division. It's multiplication and division in the order from left to right. Now, we did not have any division in any of these problems. And I don't know why I wrote 2 A's. But addition and subtraction are the same process. Addition and subtraction are actually a C, and it's combining numbers. We're combining positives and negatives. So we're combining those. It's not really addition and subtraction so much as combining positive and negative numbers. So we could just stop at PEMDA and not have the S, or PEMDUK. That doesn't sound really good. That sounds hard to pronounce. But it's PEMDAS because it sounds better, right? We can say that. We used to also say, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. You could also, I've also heard people say, because it's a combination of positive and negatives, please excuse my dear cat, because of combination of plus and minus, or positive and negative. So you look inside the parentheses first. You know, you look inside and they're grouped. You always want to look at the parentheses first and then go to the one on the outside. Look at the innermost, then to the next one. And then if there were another one, like if this had this on the outside, this would be an entirely different problem. The brackets mean something. You've got to find that value within the bracket first and get it down to a single value first before you can get rid of it. Once you get it to a single value, then you can eliminate that parenthesis. Okay? So you get this down to a single value, then we were able to eliminate the parenthesis. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to simplify it down to an answer by solving what's inside of that group first. Then we can move forward. Okay. If you still have questions, then you just go ahead and, just message me. I'm sorry, I got distracted. If you still have questions about this, please, please, please ask Lauren in class. Please message me some more. It's not about the order that you see it. It's about the order that all mathematicians have agreed to solve the problems in. It is about PEMDAS, the order of operations, and the symbol of inclusions. That is the rest of math for the rest of your life. It has to be solved in that manner. So you've got to think about that, and you've got to put that into practice. It matters. The details matter. All right, I'm going to quit running my mouth, and I'm going to let you get back to your weekend, and I will see you next week, sweetheart. I hope this really helps you.